Chapter 22 of Audrey Craven by May Sinclair. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Expatriate in Bangor, Maine. Chapter 22. That winter was a hard one for the Havilands. They were at the very lowest ebb of their resources, short of being actually in debt. The reclaiming of Hardy had been an expensive undertaking for Katherine in more ways than one. And naturally the more successful her efforts were, the more time they consumed. She had been so busy all summer finishing off old work that she had not been able to take up anything fresh. She had even been obliged to send away sitters, and they had betaken themselves elsewhere. The Witch had not sold, though she had won a big paragraph all to herself in Modern Art. In her first enthusiasm over Ted's success, Katherine had encouraged him to give up his pot boilers. She had taken over some of his black and white work herself. And in the midst of it all she was engaged on a portrait of Vincent. They were so dependent on what they earned that these serious interruptions to work threatened an inroad on their small capital. Now, they might any day have applied to Mr. Pigott for a loan, and rejoiced that worthy gentleman's heart. But such a step was the last indignity, not even to be contemplated by Ted and Katherine. And even if their pride had not stood in their way, that source of revenue seemed closed to them now. Ted and his uncle had had an unfortunate encounter in the New Gallery. The fact that he was indebted to Katherine for an invitation to the private view had not prevented Mr. Pigott from speaking his mind freely to her brother on the subject of the Witch. He said he could have forgiven Ted for painting such a picture. He could have forgiven Katherine too, if it had not been for her ability that made her doubly responsible. Ted tried to soothe him. He led him gently away from the spot. He promised to do all he could to induce Katherine to cultivate the grace of stupidity. But it was useless. The old gentleman stood to his ground, and Ted left him there. He received a letter from him the next morning. "Dear Edward, I parted from you yesterday more in sorrow than in anger. I need not tell you how deeply shocked and grieved I was to learn from a literary young friend that the subject of your sister's picture is taken from the works of the atheist Shelley, a man whose unprincipled life, I am told, is an all sufficient commentary on his opinions. Your cousin Nettie is earning a modest competence by poker work, and the painting of flowers, birds, and other innocent and beautiful objects. Why cannot Katherine do the same? When she is willing to give up her present pursuits for some becoming occupation, let her be assured of my ready encouragement and help. Till then, no more. From your affectionate uncle, James Pigott." Mr. Pigott had written his last sentence advisedly. "Some day," he said to himself, "those young people will have to put their pride in their pocket." He might have known that the Haviland pride was not of the kind that goes conveniently into any pocket, even an empty one. But Katherine worked her hardest and gave little heed to these things. She saw her own chances of success dwindling farther into the distance, and was surprised to see how little she cared, for a curious callousness had come over her of late. Selfish ambition, selfish because it often persists in living when all other things are dead, seemed to have died in her at last. Had she overcome it, or was it that she had really ceased to care? She had too much to think of to be able to settle that question just now. After all, she had another source of pride. Vincent had begun by looking to her as a protection against his worst self, and when his mother died suddenly that winter, his last link with home being broken, he became more and more dependent on Katherine. And now, though the tie of comradeship between them was closer than ever, he had no longer any need of her. He could go alone. His will was free, his intellect was awake. He read hard now. All his old ardours and enthusiasms returned to him. He worked on the Pioneer book, recasting his favourite parts, beating the whole into shape, and hunting down the superfluous adjective with a manly delight in the new sport. Katherine had shown the revised manuscript to Knowles, and he had found her a publisher and worked him into the right frame of mind. Katherine had suppressed part of that publisher's verdict. It was to the effect that though the text was up to the average merit of its kind, the illustrations would form the most valuable portion of the work. Hardy had submitted the final revision of his proofs to Katherine, but on one point he was resolute. "I want the dedication to stand as it is, Sis." And Katherine nodded her head and was silent. He often talked about Audrey now. He was no longer bitter and vindictive, as he had been in the days of his degradation. His old feeling for her had returned to him, unchanged except for the refining process he himself had undergone. His love was ennobled now by an infinite pity. Not that he had lost sight of what she had done for him, but now that his eyes were clearer he saw her as she was, and felt to the full the pathos of her vanity. Wyndham's book was severely criticized in Devon Street. One day, about 4 months after its appearance, Hardy had returned to the subject nearest his heart, and was discussing it with Katherine as he sat to her for his portrait, now nearly finished. He had just pleasantly told her that he wished he had managed to fall in love with her instead of with Audrey. She would have made something very different of him, a remark to which Katherine made no answer, treating it, as Hardy thought, with the contempt it deserved. Then he broke out, as he had done many a time before. "I don't know how it is. When I was away from her I used to think of her as a sort of amateur angel leading me on." Katherine smiled. It was very evident that Audrey had led him on. "When I was with her she seemed to be a little devil, encouraging everything that was bad in me. I don't know how she did it, but she did. And yet, Kathy, whatever they may say, I don't believe she's bad. I don't swear, of course, that she's a paragon of goodness." "Isn't there a medium?" "But she was a sweet little thing before she met that scoundrel Wyndham, wasn't she?" But Katherine was giving the whole of her attention to Vincent's nose. "Putting Audrey out of the question, I don't think much of Mr. Langley Wyndham. I don't like his books. I can't breathe in his stuffy drawing rooms. Why can't the fellow open his windows sometimes and let in a little of God's fresh air? As you know, I believe he's even a shadier character than I am." "He hasn't got a character. It's all run to literature." "H'm. I'm not so sure about that." Katherine had laid down her brushes and was examining her work with her head on one side. "Well, he can't draw a character anyhow. Laura's simply impossible." "I don't know. Laura is Audrey, and Audrey's a funny person." "I used to think that Audrey wasn't a person, that she was made up of little bits of people stuck together." "That's not bad, Sis. She is made up of bits of people stuck together." "Yes, but the thing is, what makes them stick? Mr. Wyndham doesn't go into that, and that's Audrey. His work is clever, too clever by half, but it's terribly superficial." Hardy meditated on that saying, then he began again. "You've done a great deal for me, Kathy. I sometimes think that if you'd given your mind to it, you could have made something of Audrey. You know, poor little thing, she used to think she was very strong minded. But she was more easily twisted about than any woman I know. That's what made her so fickle. If there's any truth in that stupid story of Wyndham's, she must have been like a piece of putty in her hands. I believe if you could have got hold of her you could have done her some good." "I don't believe in doing people good." "I do. I'm a case in point." "No, you're not." "I am. You did me good." "I'm very glad to hear it. If I did, it's because I never thought about it. Now, if I tried my hand on Audrey, I should set to work with the fixed intention of doing her good, therefore I should fail miserably. It's a different thing altogether." "I see no difference myself." Katherine was silent. Her charity had covered the multitude of Vincent's sins. Why had she not been able to spare a corner of it for Audrey's? "Come," said Hardy, "it's not as if she was really very bad." "No, it's not. There'd be some chance then. There is a medium, and the medium is hopeless. The wonder is you never found that out." "I did. I knew it all the time, yet I loved her. It made no difference. Nothing ever will. I've tried to kill my feeling for her, but it's no use. I can't. I should have to kill myself first, and even then I believe I should find it waiting for me in Hades when I got there." "After all, why should you try to kill it, Vincent?" "It's the shame of it, Sis." Katherine might have thought that on the contrary he seemed rather proud of the permanence of his affections, but she was too much preoccupied to be aware of his moral absurdity. "Well, I don't know much about these things, but it seems to me that even if she doesn't love you, even if she isn't everything you thought she was, there's no reason to be ashamed of loving her." "Ah, Kathy, you never loved any one like that." Her colour changed. "No, it isn't every one who can love like that." "What would you do if you were in my case, if you'd given yourself away like me? Supposing you went and lost your little heart to some man fiend who was, we'll say, about as bad a lot as I am, and who had the execrable taste not to care a rap for you. Wouldn't you feel ashamed of him and yourself too?" Katherine's white face flushed. She looked away from him and answered steadily, "No, I wouldn't." He thought he had hurt her feelings, and was about to change the subject when she turned a beaming face to him. "But then, you see, I don't love anything much." "Good as you are, you'd be a better woman if you did." "Of course there are exceptions. I've some sort of affection for the Witch and Ted." "Ted is a very fine boy, and the Witch is a very fine picture, but well, some day you'll have an affection for something else. It won't be a boy and it won't be a picture. Then, Sis, you'll know what it is to feel, and your art will go pop." "Oh, I hope not. But it's not true. Look at Ted." "Ted's a man and you are a woman. 10 to 1 a really great passion improves a man's art. It plays the deuce with a woman's." "I don't believe it," said Katherine, with rather more warmth than the occasion demanded. "Shall I tell you what you've been doing, Sis? First of all, you've tried to live 2 lives and get the best out of each. That was tempting Providence, as Mrs. Rogers would say. You found that wouldn't work, so you said to yourself, 'I give it up. Here goes. I'll be a woman at all costs. I'll know what it is to love.'" Katherine took up her brushes again, and in spite of herself moved one foot impatiently. Hardy went on, well pleased with his own lucidity. "And you gave up the only thing you really cared about, and played at being the slave of duty, the devoted sister." She sighed. Was it a sigh of relief? "You're wrong. I'm anything but a devoted sister." "Yes, you're anything but a devoted sister. I'm going to claim one of the privileges of friendship, that of speaking unpleasant truths in the unpleasantest way possible. Go on, this is getting interesting." "I repeat then, you're not a truly devoted sister. A truly devoted sister would give her brother a chance of developing some moral fibre on his own account. Ever since you two lived together you've been making noble sacrifices. Now two can't play at that game, and the boy hasn't had a chance. The consequence is he won't work. He prefers taking it easy." "That was Audrey's fault, not mine." "Yes, but you encouraged him, and now he does what he likes, young monkey, and you do all the pot boilers. And you're making yourself ill over them. So much for Ted. I've given him a hint, and he took it very well. Now for the Witch. I believe in your heart of hearts you love her better than everybody else put together. And now you're off on the other tack. You're trying to sit on the artist in you that you may develop the woman. I mean the other way about. You're sitting on the woman that you may develop the artist." "Aren't you getting a little mixed?" "That plan works worse than all. Let me implore you not to go on with it. If you only knew it, there's nothing that you will ever do that's lovelier than your own womanhood. Whatever you do, don't kill that. Don't go on hardening your heart to everything human till there's no sweetness left in your nature, Kathy. I want my little sister to make the best of her life. Some day some good man will ask you to be his wife. If, when that day comes, you don't know how to live, little woman, all the success in the world won't make up to you for the happiness you have missed." "Oh, Vincent, if you only knew how funny you are!" She laughed the laugh that Vincent loved to hear, and when she looked at him her eyelashes were all wet with it. "All right, Sis. Some day you'll own that your elder brother wasn't such a fool as you think him." "I I don't think you a fool. I only wish you knew how frightfully funny you are. No, I don't though," she added below her breath. But Vincent was quite unable to see wherein lay the humour of his excellent remarks. He considered that his experience gave him a right to speak with authority on questions of feeling, but it had not made him understand everything. The next morning Katherine was sitting before her easel, waiting for Vincent to come up for the last sitting. It was a raw, cold day, and her fingers felt numbed as they took up the brushes. Ted had made a promise to Hardy to do his fair share of the more remunerative work. Before keeping it he was giving a few final touches to one of the figures in his Dante study of Paolo and Francesca, swept like leaves on the wind of hell. He was in high good humour, and as he worked he talked incessantly, quoting from an imaginary review. "In the genius of Mr. Edward Haviland we have a new avatar of the spirit of art. Mr. Haviland is the disciple of no school. He owes no debt either to the past or to the present. He works in a noble freedom from prejudice and preconception, uncorrupted by custom as he is untrammeled by tradition. If we may classify what is above and beyond classification, we should say that in matter Mr. Haviland is an idealist, while in form he is an ultra realist. We dare to prophesy that he will become the founder of a new romantico classical school in the near future." "Oh, Ted, do be quiet, and let me think for a minute." "Oh, what's the matter, Kathy?" "I don't know. I think I'm tired, or else it's the cold." Ted looked at her earnestly, for him, and then came over to her and stroked her hair. "There's something wrong. Won't you confide in your brother?" "I'm all right, only lazy." "Can't can't I do anything?" "Well, perhaps. I don't want you to give up much of your time to it. But if you'd finish some of those black and white things. I don't feel equal to tackling them all single handed." "Oh," said the boy, turning very red, "why didn't you say so before?" He sat down and began at once on the pile of manuscripts waiting to be illustrated. But he continued to talk. "I saw Vincent the other day, and he told me his opinion of you pretty plainly." "What did he say?" "Why, that you've sacrificed your poor brother to your desire to cut a moral figure; that you've been cultivating all sorts of extravagant virtues at my expense. I might have been playing the most heroic parts and getting any amount of applause, if you hadn't selfishly bagged all the best ones for yourself. You've taken up the whole of the stage, so that I haven't had room even to exercise the minor virtues. Just reach me that sheaf of crayons, there's a good girl. Thanks." Ted put on a judicial air and chose a crayon. "Look there! You've taken the most uncomfortable chair and the worst light in the studio, when I might have been posing in them all the time. I haven't had half a chance. Vincent said so. No wonder he's disgusted with you." "Ah, that's not so bad for a mere tyro." "No, Kathy, he's quite right. You're an angel, and I've been a lazy scoundrel. But you'll admit that during my painful mental affliction I wasn't quite responsible. And afterwards well, how was I to know? I thought we were getting on very nicely." "So we were, Ted, up till now." Her last words were so charged with feeling that Ted looked up surprised. But he said nothing, being a person of tact. The sitting that morning was not a long one. Hardy seemed tired and depressed. After posing patiently for half an hour he gave it up. "It's no good this morning. I must go out and get a little warmth into me. You people had better come too." "Such a horrid day," pleaded Katherine. "You get exceedingly wet and come back no warmer. It's going to rain or snow or something." As she spoke the first drops of a cold sleet rattled on the skylight. But Vincent was obstinate and restless. "I must go if it's only for a turn on the Embankment. What with my book and your picture I haven't stretched my legs all week. Come along, Ted. You'll die, Kathy, if you persist in wallowing in oil paint like that, and taking no exercise." They set out before a cutting north easter, and a sharp shower of rain that froze as it fell. Katherine watched them as they crossed the street and turned on to the Embankment. The wind came round the corner as a north easter will, and through the window sash, chilling her as she stood. "There's nobody more surprised than myself," she said. "And yet I might have known that if I went in for this sort of thing I should make a mess of it." She went back to the fire and settled herself in the attitude of thought. There was no end to her thinking now. Perhaps that was the reason why she was always tired. Hitherto she had triumphed over fatigue and privation by a power which seemed inexhaustible and was certainly mysterious. Much of it was due to sheer youth and health, and to the exercise which gave her a steady hand and a cool head; much, doubtless, to her unflinching will. But Katherine was hardly aware how far her strength had lain in the absence of temptation to any feminine weakness. Hitherto she had seen her object always in a clear untroubled air, and her work had gained something of her life's austere and passionless serenity. Now it was all different, and she was thinking of what had made that difference. Ted came back glowing from his walk, but Vincent was colder than ever. He sat shivering over the Havilands' fire all afternoon, and went to bed early. "We'll finish that sitting to morrow, Sis," he said wearily. Ted went out again to dine with Knowles, and Katherine was left alone. It might have been her own mood, or the shadow of Vincent's, but she was depressed with vague presentiments of trouble. They gathered like the formless winter clouds, without falling in any rain. Then she realized that she was very tired. She wrapped herself in a rug and lay down on the couch to rest. And rest came as it comes after a sleepless night, not in sleep deep and restorative, but in a gentle numbing of the brain. She woke out of her stupor refreshed. The cloud had rolled away, and she could work again. She sat down to the last pile of Vincent's proofs. When she had finished them she turned over the pages again. The reading had brought back to her the last 18 months, with all the meaning that they had for her now. She looked back and thought of the years when she had first worked for Ted, of the precious time that Audrey had wasted. The fatalism that was her mood so often now told her that these things had to be. And it was better, infinitely better, for Ted to have had that experience. She looked back on the year that Vincent had wasted out of his own life, and saw that that too had to be. There had been vicarious salvation even there. Ted had once told her that there was a time when, as he expressed it, he would have walked calmly to perdition, if Vincent had not gone before him and shown him what was there. She looked back on that year of her own life, wasted, as she had once thought, the year she had given up so grudgingly at the beginning, so freely at the end, and she was content. And now she was giving up not time alone and thought and labour, but love. Love that could have no certain reward but pain. And she was still content. At first she had been astonished and indignant at her own capacity for emotion. It was as if her nature had suddenly revealed itself in a new and unpleasant light. Then she had grown accustomed to it. Yesterday she was even amused at the strangeness and the fatuity of it all. She described herself as a bungling amateur, wandering out of her own line and attempting the impossible. Clearly she should have left this sort of thing to people like Audrey, to whose genius it was suited, and who might hope to attain some success in it. But for her the love of art was quite incompatible with the art of love. She could have imagined herself entertaining these feelings for someone like Percival Knowles, for instance, who was clever and had an educated sense of humour, who wrote verses for her and flattered her artistic vanity. But to have fixed upon Vincent, of all people in the world! She must have done it because it was impossible. That was what she had said yesterday, but to day she understood. Had she not helped to make Vincent a man that she could love without shame? He was the work of her hands, that which her own fingers had made. It was natural that she should love her own work. Was she not an artist before everything, as he had said? Her tears came, and after her tears a calm, in which she heard the beating of a heart that was not her own, and felt the pulse of the divine fate that moves through human things. Then she asked herself, was Vincent right? What effect had this curious experience really had on her painting? She felt no personal interest in the answer, but she got up and went to the easel. Her portrait of Vincent was finished, all but the right hand that was still in outline. It was strange. Ted's best work had begun with his head of Audrey. What about her own? She saw through her tears that in all her long and hateful apprenticeship to portrait painting, nothing that she had ever done could compare with this last. There was a new quality in it, something that she had once despaired of attaining, and that was character. She had painted the man himself as she saw him. Not the Vincent of any particular hour, but Vincent with the memory of the past and the hope of the future in his face. All the infinite suggestion and pathos, the complex expression that life had left on it, was there. If she had not loved Vincent, loved him not only as he was, but as he might have been, would she have known how to paint like that? Although her womanhood would never receive the full reward of its devotion, that debt had been paid back to her art with interest. The artistic voice told her that Vincent was wrong, that for her what women call love had meant knowledge, that her strength would henceforth lie in the visible rendering of character, and that work of such a high order would command immediate success. And the voice of her womanhood cried out in anguish, "All the success in the world won't make up to you for the happiness you have missed." There was no sitting the next day, for Vincent was in bed, ill, with congestion of the lungs. End of Chapter 22. Recording by Expatriate in Bangor, Maine.